Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. On the Rebirth server, we are with Quintessence Last, our level 37 brute, who has nearly 5 million experience earned. We will get there today. 691,000 to go to get to level 38 in our next and final secondary power, and we're on a story arc for Stephen Sheridan. But before we do that, I do want to mention I have now half already of the Touch of the Nictus, which is an accurate healing that we should be able to put on our Siphon Life Power. We still need 3 more of these, but eventually we're going to put these in here. So I got 2 of them with Tiger Strike, and I got 1 of them with this character, and I messed up. I actually bought the 3rd one, this one here, at the level 50 level. By accident, it defaults to your current level. So I bought it at the level 50 level with Nightmare Last with all of the merits she had left. So now I can make it, but I can't use it for 10 levels. So I don't see the point of. I didn't see the point of holding on to it. I went ahead and bought the level 40 version of it. At some point I'll swap it out maybe, but we're going to be getting these 3 long before level 50, and I didn't want to wait that long because this thing already has 6 slots, so let's just go ahead and get this slotted in. So we need, I think, 450 merits. That's a couple of story arcs in a couple of weeks, so hopefully by the time we're level 40 or 41, we'll be able to slot these puppies in. And as we get to higher level, we'll be able to get slightly higher level versions of the last 3. It's fine. They give more than enough buff, and the set bonuses work, I think, regardless of what level they are. We can actually check that right now. Let's see if that's true. So this says 1.88% maximum health at level 50, and this says 1.88% at level 40. So the set bonuses aren't affected, just the percentages are, and with IOs, once you get over level 35 or so, you're fine. So, yeah, they're not quite as maxed out, tweaked out as when they're level 50s, but who cares? We're not even going to play this character at level 50 other than maybe the final story arc. So let's talk to our contact, Steve Sheridan. We're on the Organ Grinder storyline, and he says, let's see. This one, I think I just got a call from Rebecca Brunell over in Seraph. She said she wants you to visit her right away. She couldn't discuss the news on the phone, but I'm hoping it's a lead on this Ricky plot we've been investigating. So we're going to go talk to Rebecca Brunell, who is in Atlas Park. See, if I hadn't messed that up, I'd actually have 4 of the 6 enhancements crafted, which is a little frustrating, a lot frustrating. But it's okay. We'll figure it out, and we'll get it sorted fairly soon. Meanwhile, we've got 3 of our sets already in, and this character, I would say, well before level 40, we're going to have 4 sets on her already, which is pretty good. And everything else has been IO'd except for some jumps and an endurance modification and a couple of defense, and those will be generic IOs within a very short period of time. We're starting to get finally caught up on our slots. We just need 4 more on Midnight Grasp, 2 more on Soul Drain. We should be there, hopefully by level 41 or 42. We're going to need some slots in Focused Accuracy, assuming we take that. We're going to need some slots in some of the other powers, but we'll see. Not sure what epic pool we're going to take. We'll see. All right, so she says, I wanted to tell you that the Federal Bureau of Superpowered Affairs, FBSA, was very happy with your help in saving the Seraph Lab. Months of Richter research was almost wiped out entirely, and we have you to thank for saving it. It took a call from the Vice President and a background check, but you now have Omega clearance, and I can tell you what Seraph has learned from analyzing the Richter. Are you ready for this? Richter are humans. Biologically, they're not alien at all, just highly mutated human beings. That means that the Richter homeworld is not another planet, but an alternate Earth. You can imagine the panic if this was to get out. Not like anyone would really believe it, though. One thing we aren't sure of is if the Richter themselves know this fact. If they did, They would most likely use it to their advantage somehow. All right, so these things that look like aliens are actually humans, and they are heavily mutated human beings from an alternate Earth. I remember when I found that out for the first time, I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Because I thought they were like space aliens from another planet. I didn't know they were actually from another Earth. And this raises the question, are there aliens in City of Heroes? Right? The aliens seem to be Rikti, but the Rikti are alternate Earthers. They're not actually aliens. The Praetorians are alternate Earthers. Hamadan is like a guy named, whatever his name, Phil Hamadan, or whatever, Hamadan somebody. He's just a human that's been mutated, and that's where the Devouring Earth come from. So that's a good question as I think about the factions. Are there actually space aliens in City of Heroes or not? I can't think of any if not for the Rikti. And of course, they aren't. They're humans. That's an interesting question. I don't think there are actual space aliens other than maybe the player characters. Keldians. Keldians are space aliens. Okay, so we do have space aliens, just not the Rikti. All right, so you can't talk about what she told you. From the way you're acting, I can imagine it's really juicy. Don't go breaking your code clearance on my account. Now, back to this problem of the Rikti organ thefts. What's going on there? Now we want to hit the streets with Weintraub's psychic probe. You set it to probe for information on organs, so we're going to have to defeat. Now, 45 Rikti, just great. All right, guys, I'll pause it here and I'll bring you back when we've defeated 45 Rikti. All right, folks, we are back fighting a Rikti drone. This is our last one. As I've said before, just in case you're looking for Rikti, they do spawn right here by Philippa Moreau, either on the edges of this island over on that side, or across the water from her over there, and then across over there as well. So now we need to investigate a Rikti base in Craze Folly, so let's just auto-teleport there, since it's quite the trip from here. I actually went to Craze Folly and did about 20 Rikti there, but the problem is they share spawn point with Nemesis and I think Devouring Earth, so after I cleaned out like 20 of them, I couldn't find them anymore. They were very hard to find. So I just came back here to Founders Falls, or back there, I guess, since we're now in Craze Folly. It's a big zone, so I'm glad we used our auto-teleport. So now we are trying to find clues about the Rikti. So as we go, let's talk role-playing again. I don't think I've mentioned this before. At one point, I was having a conversation with someone online, and they were talking about, they were power gaming, they were min-maxing their character. And in more than one thread, I kind of expressed, which I've said here, that as a player, you should trust your game master. You shouldn't feel the need to uber max your character out, because you should trust that the game master isn't going to require you to max out unless he tells you or she tells you. Right? If a GM says, "Look, I'm going to be running a killer game, and you'd better max your character out," sure. But under normal circumstances, you don't need to max your character out. And consequently, if you trust your game master to run a fair game and run a game that is balanced for your party as it is, not some MMO version of your party that's super idealized, you trust your game master to give you challenges that are appropriate, challenges that are fun, to run a fun game, you shouldn't really have to worry about maxing your character out. And by the way, I've mentioned this to my best friend, who, again, I think is very much in an MMO mentality and is always seeking to max his character out. And I've said to him, look, you got to trust your GM, i.e. me. Trust that I'm not going to need, you're not going to need to be maxed out. I'm not going to make you do that. And I think he just has a hard time with it because he's so used to playing games like this where part of what you're doing is maxing out your character, and you don't really need to do that in a tabletop game where you have a game master, because the game master is someone you should be able to trust. Now, this person said something that's absolutely true. She said, if you can't trust your game master, you shouldn't be playing with them, and I agree. But there are a lot of players who consciously, on the conscious overt level would say, yeah, I trust my game master, but on the unconscious level are, implicitly doing this maxing out because on an unconscious level, it's not that they don't trust him, it's that they haven't stopped to think about the fact that the power gaming is implicitly coming from a place of mistrust, right? You don't trust City of Heroes as a game to be playable with non-maxed out characters, at least the way you want. So you feel like you have to max the game out. You have to max your character out. And that's justified in a video game because the video game, implicitly that the video game was not built around your personal character, but rather was built for a sort of generic idealized character who had been built in the way the developers were expecting. And if you haven't built the way the developers are expecting, you end up with a very difficult time, maybe unplayable. But a DM or GM doesn't have to treat things that way. And so you should trust your game master. One shouldn't have to keep reminding you to trust your game master, but one often does because people don't realize that what they're doing is sort of knee-jerk reacting to the online MMO computer-generated type mindset rather than the mindset of having a personal GM who is running the game for you. But the other thing she said when we talked about balance and how game masters, often will sort of step in to make sure that the PCs are balanced and that they're not overpowered. She said, well, why doesn't a game master have to trust their players? And that's a really good point. You should trust your players. But I think that there's a different kind of style, if you want to call it that, to the trust, a different topic of the trust. I'm not sure how to say it. The trust between a GM and a player goes different each way, right? The player is trusting the GM to play fair with them, to be trying to help everybody have a good time and so forth. And yeah, players should want everybody to have a good time, but that's not really the player's responsibility. The player is responsible for him or herself, right? When you're a GM trusting a player, well, I trust my players to roll their dice and not cheat, right? I trust my players, when they level up, I just say level up and send me your character when you're done. I don't double check. If they threw a bunch of crap onto their character sheet that they're not supposed to have, I might not notice for a very long time, unless they used it in combat and I was like, wait a minute, where'd that come from? So that kind of trust, I do have with my players, but there's a difference between players and game masters, obviously so, in that the player often cannot see the big picture. They can't know everything the GM knows. They aren't scrutinizing everybody's character sheet. They're not paying attention to everybody's character sheet, and they may not be thinking about how their character sheet and what it says is related to the character sheets of other characters. They may be in no real position to make that decision because maybe they can't even see the other guy's character sheets. You can on D&D Beyond, but if you're not playing D&D Beyond and you're playing in Roll20 or Foundry or something, you may not even be able to see the other guy's character sheet to know what you're doing, how what you're doing relates to what they're doing. And so the players don't have that information. The GM does. The players don't know the details of the world, anything that the GM hasn't told them. The GM knows it all, presumably. The players don't know what the GM has planned for the next adventure, for the next 2 adventures. The GM knows it. The players don't know these things. And so things that could mess up the GM's plans, the players wouldn't do them if they knew it, but they may not know it. They may not be in a position to know it. And so, yeah, you have honest players that you can trust, but these players have incomplete information, whereas the GM has complete information, right? And so, to some degree, the players are almost like the developers of a video game in the sense that the developers of City of Heroes have incomplete information about what my character is going to be like. They're just basing it on kind of their generic assumptions. They don't actually know all the details of my character. They can't know those. And so they're working on incomplete information when they design missions and mob difficulties and such. And they do their best. They were trying to make a good, fun game for sure, right? Nobody purposely tries to make a game that sucks, but they can't have complete information because they don't know the exact details of every character going through the game. And similarly, a player might not want to be overpowered, but if they don't have complete information about the other characters in the game, if they don't have complete information about what the campaign is like and who the villains are going to be, then if they don't know those things, then they could end up making a character that wildly unbalances the game or screws it up in some way for everybody, not on purpose, not because they're trying to be jerks, but because they aren't the game master, and so they don't have the complete information. They don't have the whole picture. They can't have the whole picture by definition as a player. Let me give you a simple example. I've said before, I think, the wish spell is banned in my campaign. Right? Now, why is it banned? Is it because I think it's too powerful? Well, I mean, I guess maybe. But it's actually banned for a specific reason having to do with my campaign, and not just having to do with power levels, but the actual story of my campaign. And the reason is that I decided to have the villain, the big bad evil guy as they call him, right? The guy who's the Emperor Palpatine of my story. He's a revenant. Now, in Dungeons and Dragons, a revenant is an undead being who essentially can't be permanently killed. They have sworn revenge on someone or something. In this case, the guy has sworn revenge on Rome and sworn to see it destroyed. He wants to take down the empire and take down the city of Rome, who his people once ruled thousands of years ago. And the Romans rose up against his people. They waged a 100-year war against them. They killed every single one of his people, the Dragonborn, except for him and this evil guy Magog. As he was dying, prayed to the Titans, the reptile gods, who were also being defeated by the Roman gods. He prayed for strength, he prayed for salvation, and one of the evil Titans made him a revenant with her Titan powers. Okay? And so now the way this guy works is, even if the PCs were to kill him, 24 hours later, he comes back because Rome hasn't been destroyed. The only way he goes to the afterlife is if Rome is destroyed, or if someone casts a wish spell to wish him to have peace in the afterlife. Basically, you wish him to rest in peace. And if you do that, then he stops being a revenant and he can be killed. It's actually, the way it works is after he dies and before he resurrects, because he has 24 hours before he comes back, you have to cast a wish that his spirit knows peace and he'll never come back. Okay, so the problem with this is that if the characters just have access to the wish spell, then as soon as they hit 17th level, they could basically wish the guy to be in peace and end the campaign, whether or not they've finished it. Okay? And I don't want them to just cast a wish spell and end the campaign. There's a storyline, right? And what they're supposed to find out is that because this guy is a revenant and he was made a revenant by a titan, only a titan's wish can undo it. But all the titans are trapped in Tartarus, in the bottomless pit at the bottom of Tartarus, including even the good ones, because that's where the gods threw them, right? This is the basic Greek/Roman god mythology, is that the gods rose up against the titans and threw them in Tartarus. So how do they do it? Well, it turns out that there is a magical item created by Bahamut, who is a good dragon, a good titan. And Bahamut it's basically a horn that you can sound. And what you do is you blow through the horn. And as you blow through the horn, you make your wish. And if it is a selfless wish, can't be I want money and fame. It has to be a selfless wish and a just wish. Your wish will be granted. And since it is the wish of a titan's power, it can be used to undo the Revenant spell on this evil villain, right? So I don't want somebody to be able to cast a spell because I want them to have to find the Horn of Bahamut and use it as the way to finally end the threat to the Roman Empire, right? And so um, I want the way to solve this to be using a good Titan's powers to defeat the evil Titan's powers, essentially. So even though Bahamut is still trapped in the uh, the pit of Tartarus, Bahamut's power is in the horn that they're going to sound, like sort of the trumpet of Bahamut, and that will enable the Revenant to know peace, right? So I took the wish spell away, not just because I think it's overpowered, although I do think it's overpowered. I could have said you can only use it in the sort of the default way, which is you can use Wish to cast any other spell lower a level than Wish, and you can't do anything else with it. You could, within the rules, you could justifiably say that. That's sort of GM's discretion. But and so you could theoretically do that, and I could have. But I just decided I'm going to disable Wish. I'm going to disallow it as a spell, not because it's overpowered, but because I have a story about the Wish, right? And so I want that story to be that I want that to be part of the story, and it won't be part of the story. It won't be part of the story if they can just cast the spell at 17th level, right? So, um, so that's an example of a player getting to 17th level, not knowing I have this plan, right? Could theoretically take the wish spell, not knowing what it's going to do to my campaign, and then end up causing the campaign to be prematurely ended by being able to cast wish and where's the drone? Being able to cast wish and like prematurely defeat the bad guy, right? And so the player's not meaning to do that, right? They're just, hey, let's try this, but they don't realize, well, you've just destroyed the whole final adventure that I'm expecting them to go on, which is to find the horn, right? And then take the horn to the evil guy's lair and fight him and kill him and sound the horn. That's my guess of what they're going to do. They don't obviously have to do that, but sort of in my head, that's where I'm planning things to go, and I think it'll be cool if things go there. And I have some ideas of where the horn will be, and I already know where the evil guy's base is, and how it's like they can't just get in there. You have to basically know the password, and I know what the password is and why, and they're going to have to figure that out too, and all of this. But if they have a wish spell and they're just like, well, let's just wish him dead and knowing peace, right? Then they could just end it right there. And so my point is not so much how wish works, but that it's possible, not knowing the campaign, not knowing the plot, not knowing what the GM has in store, not knowing the fact that this guy's a revenant, they don't know it yet. It's very possible that players, not knowing these things, could give their characters abilities, could do things with their characters that kind of ruins the story, not only for the GM, but for everybody. Right? The GM knows these things, and so the GM can say, look, we're not going to do that because I have other plans. Right? Same thing with psionics in my world. I said, I had read Stronghold and Followers, and I liked Matt Colville's version of psionics, and D&D at the time, a year and a half ago, really didn't have psionics. So I said, well, I'm going to use that. Right? I'm going to use that version of psionics. And then when Unearthed Arcana came out with, or whatever, the Tasha's Cauldron, everything came out with their lame, crappy version of psionics, I had already had plans. I was already planning to send the characters to the astral plane. I was already making the astral plane a plane of the mind, where things happen by mind rather than physically. and that fit in with my psionics. So my world was already set. I already had the astral plane worked out. I already had the powers of the astral dragon worked out as psionics. So when D&D comes along with their version of psionics, I'm like, no, I'm disallowing that. Not to be a jerk, but because I have other plans that I've made up. And this is going to mess with those plans. And so a character, a player, comes along and says, well, I want these psionic powers, and tries to take them. They don't know that I have these other plans, right? So this is why it's not that you don't trust your players. If they had complete knowledge, they would probably play completely fair. The problem is that they don't have complete knowledge, and they can do things that can break your story, break your game, break your world, break the experience for everybody else without realizing it, because they don't have complete knowledge. They don't know what the other player characters have. They don't know the other guy's background, right? So let's say player number one, great example, player number one makes up a background that his village was destroyed, and he doesn't know who destroyed his village, and one of his goals as an adventurer is going to be to find the destroyer of his village and get revenge. And then player number two comes along and has essentially the same background, right? That the village was destroyed and he's looking for the person that destroyed his village, right? And the game master's already worked with the other player for like a week on this origin and says to the second player, sorry, you can't do that. Well, why not? Well, I can't tell you why not, but you can't do that. Right? Now, trust your player to write a good background. Well, that's not the issue. The issue is this player doesn't know that he's just made up the same background as somebody else. Right? And it's supposed to be a secret, and so he's not supposed to tell the other players, because the player of the guy, the first character, wants to reveal it to the party as time goes on, as role play. And so, again, this is something where the player may not know that they're stepping on the toes of another player, because the information isn't available. They don't have complete information. And so, and that's why, yes, as a DM or GM, you should trust your players, but players have to realize that sometimes the GM knows a lot that they don't know. And I'm not talking about like how the rules work. Yeah, there's some of that. But the GM also knows things about the world and about the other characters that you don't know, which is why a lot of times, through no fault of their own, players can kind of accidentally decide to do something that would harm the gameplay. And the GM has to step in and say no. And it's not that the GM doesn't trust the player to be a good player. It's that the GM knows the player doesn't have this information, and they can't act on the information that the GM has. Right? And that's why sometimes the GM has to act in ways that may superficially seem like they don't trust the players. Right? So you've made this character that's super min-maxy, and I say, well, look, it's too min-max, you need to cut down. Well, trust me not to abuse the power. Well, that's not really it. The issue is, if your character's that much more effective than everybody else, then it becomes impossible to balance the combat. Again, if you think about champions, one of my friends made up a character in a shared world of multiple GMs where we had all unanimously agreed that 70 active points was the maximum you could have. One of my friends made up a character who, when he had all of his powers turned on, could have 85 strength, which is 85 active points, 15 points more than we allowed. He argued the character's not always going to turn the power on, and that was true, although those powers were turned on far more often than not. But the problem with that 85 strength is, now everyone's physical defense had to be high enough that 17 dice 6 of damage, which is something like on average 59 stun, right? That 17 dice 6 of damage isn't going to just flatten the bad guy, right? So you subtract physical defense from the damage. Let's say you only give the guy 18 physical defense. He just took 41 stun from a single attack. That's enough to stun anybody with less than a 40 constitution, which is nearly everybody in the game other than mega villains. And once you're stunned, you're basically screwed in combat because your powers drop and you can't do anything. And most bad guys have no more than 60 stun. So in one single punch against an 18 PD, Titanos can stun and nearly flatten somebody. One shot. So I can't allow that. As a GM, I'm going to have to make the villain have 30 physical defense. So now when Titanus punches him, he does 19 damage. But when the other character that only has 12d6 of attack and does 42 stun hits, he does almost nothing, right? And so it makes it really hard to balance the combat. It's not that I don't trust my friend not to abuse his 85 strength. It's just that there's no reason for his character not to turn his powers on, right? You're outdoors, you can grow really tall, the ground can take your high density, so you turn your powers on. Why wouldn't you? And now in the middle of this fight, this character is either going to completely stomp the bad guys, or if the bad guys can hold up to him, then all the other characters can't do anything, right? And so that's the problem. It's not that you don't trust the person. It's that looking at the other characters and their abilities, you look at this and go, your character is just going to way outstrip everybody else, and that's going to mess up the campaign, right? And again, it's not about not trusting somebody. It's that the player, how is the player going to know, well, when is it too many times to turn all my powers on, right? When have I done it too many times, too often, because now I'm upstaging people? Well, that's really hard to judge, and we don't want the other players to feel upstaged, and so it's the GM's job to keep track of all that and try to keep things balanced for everybody. And so, again, it's not that the players aren't trustworthy, it's that players have different amount of knowledge and different goals from the DM, and the DM has to kind of be objective and be sort of the wide-angle lens, whereas the players are zoomed in on a single character. And you kind of need both, right? You need somebody to do the wide-angle lens, and you need the players to be zoomed in on their one character, and you kind of need both. But when somebody's zoomed in, they can't see the big picture. And so it's not so much about trust, right? It's about whether you're able to see the big picture or not. And so, so just think about that when you're working on player characters in a tabletop game. Doesn't have to be D&D or Champions, which have been my two examples. It could be Call of Cthulhu or Savage Worlds or any number of other games. It's just that the game master sees everything and is keeping all of it in mind. And when they tell you no, it's not because they don't trust you. It's because they see part of the picture that you may not see. And seeing the whole picture with their wide-angle lens, this particular thing is an issue, and they're trying to prevent it from being an issue. So anyway, that's my comment about trusting players and game masters. This is a long mission, so I think we're probably going to stop here. We found a clue, which is we found decaying Richte organs and mutating human organs. So the Richte organs are decaying, and they're trying to use human organs to replace their own organs. Let's talk to Sheridan, who says, "Oh, is that it? That's it. So the Richte burn out their own organs, possibly by overworking themselves during combat. It's still hard to believe they were trying to replace the organs with mutated human ones. I can't see how that would work, them being aliens and all." Well, we didn't tell him the truth, so that finishes this story arc. And we're at 33 minutes, which is perfect timing. Let's head to Ouroboros. So we got 21 more reward merits, but we're going to need a lot more. We're going to need to get to 125 or 150. And we have 42, so we're going to need to complete a bunch more story arcs. Today is Sunday, so hopefully we will be getting a number of more cards that we can draw, and maybe we'll get lucky and get like a couple of 75 merit cards, and right away be able to buy another one of these recipes. But we'll just keep plugging along until next time when we are on our next story arc. I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes on the Rebirth server.